want to get right to our guest today, Mark Harris. He is a whistleblower that has just been absolutely punished for having asserted the truth. He joins us now live. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, and sorry for the delay. I was the time zone. I should have clarified with you. I'm used to working the opposite direction. My publisher and his team are out on the West Coast. So I'm having to do the math the other direction.
No apology necessary. I've fallen victim to that myself. But welcome, and thanks for getting up early to join us. So you have a story about murder, child trafficking, and intrigue, and as well as airline pilot turned whistleblower. Tell us from 30,000 feet just the summary of the book that you've written, and give us the title of it.
Well, the title of the book is Houses of the Holy, a Nightmare Web of Hate, Crime, Corruption, and Child Abuse. And I would add to your synopsis there, and we haven't had a lot of time to talk about the details of the story, drugs and guns. A lot of this mess goes back to the 80s and stuff that was going on in Florida, and in this big, hairy, tangled web of people I uncovered looking for answers as to why, I couldn't protect my kids, or I was doing my best to protect my kids, and was getting steamrolled over by local, state, and ultimately federal authorities and agencies, and all of them circling the wagons and running around, with a figurative broom and a mop, cleaning up after this federal convict sociopath. I didn't know why, and I was just trying to protect my kids from him, and he's my ex-father-in-law.
All right, so let's back it up. Let's zoom out real quick. You were in a bad marriage, and not only were you in a bad marriage, but you were also victimized by what I understand to have been a really bad father-in-law, and your marriage started to disintegrate. And what was the reason? What were the reasons for that, and what happened exactly?
Well, and that's another part of the story. The marriage disintegrated because my ex-wife was severely mentally ill, and obviously a victim of her own severe childhood abuse, and she's spiraled further and further and further out of control, and a continuous string of affairs and suicidal thoughts and distorted thinking, and even put in writing thoughts of infanticide, and other disturbing stuff that she wrote over the years that I discovered, and causing me to be concerned for her safety and our kids' safety.
And so when you say that she was abused as a child, what kind of abuse did she suffer?
Severe mental and sexual abuse.
So she was sexually abused, and by whom, do you maintain?
Well, my sons, and this is in a therapist report from a PhD psychologist who did psychological testing on my kids. I have a massive amount of records from an army of some of the best mental health professionals. My kids disclosed to her that they were shown pictures of their own mother being sexually abused as a child to convince them that it was okay. Now, my kids were sexually abused by multiple perpetrators, and as these reports say, my oldest son was made to be the aggressor in this. His grandfather tried to groom him. He was literally forced to take pictures of his own little brother and his aunts, who were children at the time, my ex-father-in-law's, my ex-wife's younger sisters, in sexual performances, and witness them being prostituted out to other people.
I can tell you, I've lived 72 years. This is one of the most difficult stories I've ever listened to. I watched a YouTuber with a program called Redacted. He's a former Fox News anchor, and he had you on his show, and that's how I became aware of your story. And I have to tell you, it is one of the most gruesome, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching stories I've ever listened to. And so, I apologize for making our listeners uncomfortable, but I am on the trail of child trafficking and the abuse of children. It is a topic that I have become almost as obsessed about as I am the Kennedy assassination, which we won't go into. But our listeners know that this is a theme that I have repeatedly talked about, and a subject that I have studied for 60 years. I'm developing that same level of interest in the vein of exploitation of children and child trafficking, which I think is, I'll say it again, and will continue to say, I think it is the worst crime that can be committed against humanity when someone takes advantage of a child, and particularly in a sexual manner. It scars that human for life. There is no defense, there is no rationalization, there is no way to color it any other way than a heinous crime that should be punished to the maximum extent. And so you're saying that your children were sexually abused, and not only were they abused, but they were videoed, and that their own grandfather groomed them. Is that what did I hear you correctly?
Well, you did, and not only that, I discovered a network of these people. There was a church pastor that he was tied directly to that faced similar allegations. You cannot find any report of any investigation. The interview with his ex-wife is in my book, a summary of it, that I didn't participate in, by the way. My publisher and an investigative journalist who helped with this book did all the interviews for the book. There was a case in an adjacent county that was tied to the same network of people, where multiple neighbors reported to me that there was this foster family. The foster father was actually a French national. I've tracked him. I've verified a number of the facts that these people told me. I've identified who the man was, traced him back to France, where he apparently has gone back to now. And they said he was throwing around money and buying new sports cars and this and that, and all of a sudden they vanished in the middle of the night. I think it was in 2001 this has occurred. And that child pornography, video equipment, computers were found in the house, and it was all made to go away. And then I ended up having my career as a pilot sabotaged when my ex-father-in-law colluded with the manager of human resources at my airline, who went on to become the manager of equal opportunity at Delta Airlines. Well,
And you were at Atlantic Southeast Airlines, if I
yes, I
understand
was
correctly.
Atlantic Southeast Airlines.
And were you a captain on the airline?
I was not. I could have been, but I don't know how much you know about the airline world, but at that point in time, I was raising my kids alone, and I opted to remain a first officer for seniority purposes.
Okay, so you were with Atlantic Southeast Airlines, and so
yes.
but when you discovered the atrocities that were committed against your children, you tried to expose this, correct?
I did, and I had my life ripped to shreds. But let me finish that last thought, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This human resources manager who conspired to sabotage my career as a pilot, he has since been arrested for raping and torturing foster kids, using guns to intimidate them, making child pornography with them. So again, that would appear to be his possible motive for the actions he engaged in to sabotage my career as a pilot. But yes, I mean, when all was said and done, an absolute army of medical, mental health, education professionals had weighed in. A ton of them made reports. Every single one of those reports, absolutely by Florida law, required a law enforcement investigation. Law enforcement refused, just arrogantly, defiantly, refused to investigate, refused to put those allegations in a report. I sent massive records. I tried to get an appointment with the sheriff himself. I kept getting deflected by the sheriff's department's attorneys. Everybody lawyered up in the end. And And the same thing happened when I discovered that the man had an arsenal of guns and ammo, and he's a felon. The same thing happened when the kids disclosed witnessing murder. Everything kept getting shut down. Every effort by anyone to report any of this resulted in retaliation against me and the victims, my kids.
So you also had, as part of your story, that your children were forced to watch a capital crime committed. If I
Yes.
tell us
And the
about
details they provided, are things that children, particularly children that age, couldn't have possibly made up. Their therapists at the time testified, the kids were telling the truth. They believed what they were saying. There was no evidence they'd been coached. And they provided graphic details, particularly Gabe. He's autistic. He has a photographic memory. He has Asperger's syndrome. He's very artistic as well. He was able to, draw pictures and number the events. And they identified 5 crime scenes, 5 related crime scenes, the vehicle, the living room at the house where it occurred, the place where the body was temporarily buried, the place where the body was taken out and burned, utility trailer that was used, but none of these crime scenes were ever examined. They refused. They didn't just refuse to examine the crime scenes. They refused to interview my kids and refused to take a report. I tried 3 times to report this and was blocked from making a report on one of those occasions.
Exactly what was it you were reporting?
That my kids, in this case, that my kids said that they had witnessed a murder.
Your children told you that they had witnessed a murder.
Correct.
And did they give you details of the time, place, and details about what occurred?
Graphic details, yes.
And what did those include?
Well, excuse me. It included that it occurred at 1118 Rhonda Drive in Niceville, Florida, their grandparents' old house. They no longer live there. That's why I call it their old house. That it was a gunshot. Gabe, my oldest son, he described the victim laying on the floor, heavy breathing, gurgling, seeing him die, being put in a body bag or some sort of bag, taken out to the backyard of the house, buried, that he was forced to assist in this. Digging up the body later, he described the decomposed state, the insects, and the smell. He said it smelled like, he was just a child. He said it smelled like 10,000 rotten squid. We like to fish, so he knew what rotten squid smelled like, I guess.
So with that information, you went to the authorities.
Yes.
And how did they respond to your?
They threatened to arrest me if I filed a report, and then threatened to go after my job and say I was crazy.
So you were reporting a murder.
Yes.
As part and parcel of abuse that were occasioned upon your children. Correct. And you were made the bad guy. You were told.
I was made the bad guy over and over again. Yes. Mm-hmm. Before it was all said and done, I was accused of having a history of domestic violence, a history of mental illness, a history of alcoholism.
Did you?
A DUI conviction, that I had been court-martialed and convicted of something in the military. Just all the stuff that was absolutely made up, completely made up.
Did you have a history of any of those things? Did you have a DUI?
No.
I mean, wouldn't that be easy enough to disprove? I mean, if they said that you had a DUI, where did you get the DUI, and what was the punishment for the DUI? And you go to that jurisdiction and order a certified copy, and it doesn't exist. I mean,
I've done all that and provided it to the government. Just last night, just yesterday, I got a response to my appeal. I did a FOIA request just in relation to this bizarre sideshow that sabotaged my career with a fake medical history, a fake DUI, and issuing me a fake special issuance medical certificate labeling me an alcoholic. So I requested 15 specific records. and, and and I don't remember the number, but I think it was like 10 of my requests. Uh, the government blatantly lied, and on the other ones, they said they didn't have any records. So I appealed it. Just yesterday, I got a response. It was basically the big middle finger to me. We're not going to answer any of your questions, and we don't have to. So via email. So.
Well, going back to the murder, you know where
Yeah.
it allegedly occurred.
Yes.
Have you made any attempt? I mean, it seems to me that one of the and your father-in-law doesn't live there any longer, if I understand you correctly. How long ago did this occur?
This was in. I'm reasonably certain it was January 2009 because he and the family, assisted by public officials, literally kidnapped my kids, used them as human shields in a very well documented kidnapping and extortion scheme. I've got phone records, audio recordings of phone calls that I recorded, witness statements, everything. It was a kidnapping and extortion scheme. It was drop the allegations of sexual abuse or I will take your kids. They took the kids, tried to use them to coerce me into dropping the allegations in exchange for seeing my kids, and I refused. But so anyway, they had the kids. Most of the events, the horrific things that happened to my kids occurred between October 31st, 2008, and towards the end of January of 2009, when I finally got my kids back through a long legal battle. So I believe it occurred in January in 2009, right when the judge issued the order that they could no longer hide my kids from me anymore. They scrambled in a big cover-up, and what my kids describe a chaotic scene of hauling off guns, this guy getting murdered, and all sorts of stuff happening in a short amount of time. So
I'm just sitting here mystified and hugely disappointed if it is true that you've got two children, both testifying that they witnessed a murder, a gruesome murder, and that nothing was done to either validate the story or discredit the story. I mean, for starters, why wouldn't someone just go to that house and look for evidence of a murder? I mean, that
right.
would be pretty hard to cover up, wouldn't it?
Right, and that's what I said. The utility trailer I referenced had been stolen from me, and I eventually recovered it. And I found evidence in it, and law enforcement refused to examine it. We found this site in the woods, in the Eglin Air Force Base reservation. There were I counted 8 specific identifying features of that site that positively identified it, that were described by my children, particularly my oldest son, in advance, which is how we found it with those identifying features. We
Okay, so
searched for months.
I, I now have to ask you why. Why would the government go to such lengths to cover up and refuse to investigate allegations of murder and allegations of child abuse? What's going on? And how high does it go?
Well, it goes high enough to where, I was ganged up on by all the president's men and women, as the term I like to use in court, in the 2013. Um, my book has the answers I found looking for that very answer. Why? It's always been the question, why? I found a whole lot of stuff. Which of that stuff is the ultimate motive, or is it all combined? But dirty deals with the government. My ex-father-in-law wore a wire to set up a co-conspirator in 1986. He's a federal convict. While this was going on in Alabama, he entered into business with some business partners centered down in Hialeah, Florida. Well, the central figure in that, this lawyer who set up all these corporations for him and his partners, he was a middleman in all kinds of criminal activities as a real estate attorney and tied to organized crime, politicians, and so forth. He made a deal with the government in the late 80s and turned witness for the government. So there's, all kind of, I mean, the tangled web includes lots of mob ties, even some shady characters with ties to the CIA, and one international weapons trafficker that was involved in selling cluster bombs to Saddam Hussein. It's just this massive tank. It's Florida. I discovered the underbelly of Florida, really. So, but one thing I don't know if we've mentioned, Nobles was a foster parent, just like this human resources manager, and the state of Florida has erased those records. There's a witness, a friend of mine who tried to help me and got crushed in the process. She was shown records that those foster kids were removed for abuse. I have a record I found from 2007, a 911 call from inside that house. I don't know who made the call. There's no report of what happened. It just says everything 10-4, and that's it. So, but some victim actually called 911 from inside that house. And the man in the house is a black hole of crimes erased and records erased, foster kids erased, a massive arsenal in the hands of a felon erased.
What is what are they covering up? Why is this huge conspiracy of silence covering something up? Evidently, if I'm reading you between the lines, what is it? What is it they're afraid of that they will find if they investigate these crimes?
Well, I mean, I think there were. I mean, for example, this house in Walton County, this alleged foster kid human trafficking operation. That man was tied to some powerful people, including a Pentagon official.
Okay, but what was the underlying crime that they were trying to obscurate and not allow to come to light?
I've been hesitant to go there, but I'll just go there and just say it. At this site where this man had, this underground bunker with a drug lab and an arsenal of weapons and safe full of cash and all this crazy stuff. He showed my son, Mike Nobles, my ex-father-in-law, showed my son a weapon in a glass case, accompanied by newspaper articles of the Kennedy assassination, and he told my son that this was a hero's gun. This was the gun that killed the president. Now, this tangled web of people he's part of includes Cuban exiles, CIA operatives, white supremacists from Alabama, multiple ties to Santo Trafficking Jr. and other mob figures. So there's no way to even prove that gun existed, and I certainly can't prove it was the assassination rifle. But that could have been the motive from a federal perspective, a tie to the Kennedy assassination. Other than that, my only other theory would be powerful people involved in human trafficking, or protecting government informants. I've tried to look at every angle of this, because the why has been the big question.
Absolutely. Well, it's a terrifying story. Where are your children today, and what kind of shape are they in? And where are the other people? Your wife, your father-in-law, the bad people?
They're all in Alabama. They've created a little family compound in Harrison, Arkansas, which is the home of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, which is ultimately what my ex-father-in-law is and has always has been, dating back to the 80s. It's tied to various hate groups. My older kids are with me. My oldest has his own apartment, but I keep close track of him and help him out and help him pay his bills and take him to a psychiatrist appointment and all
And
that.
did your publisher, you're naming names, did your publisher vet these accusations, and did they do any independent analysis? Because certainly there are libel and slander laws against people.
There are 309 citations in the book. The page of the sources is lengthy. I have probably 2,000 pages of records. An investigative journalist helped finish this book.
Mark Harris, I got to take a hard break. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a gut-wrenching story. God bless you, and I hope that God smiles fondly on your children and that they're able to lead productive, safe, secure lives. Mark Harris, author of Houses of the Holy. We'll be back right after this.